Hey, welcome. This is The Process. My name is Dr. John Bush. This is for the Science of FantasyFootball.com. We're having fun. I am currently in best ball leagues at FFPC. This is some information that I use and kind of how I look at things, and you can follow along here. I thought I'd post this, and we'll get started here. This is May 24th. And first thing is I converted all the ADP to a proprietary value number, from 100 being the highest value to 0. This is me asking the question, what does the public think? This is not what I think necessarily. Again, we're into that reference class forecast model where we have to have something to compare to. Google, looking at Twitter and hearing all the proclamations is not the way that we approach reference class forecasting. A bunch of yo-yos out there, making proclamations. That's not my process. I try to, we're talking wisdom of the crowds here, and again, just gives me something to think about. Okay, there are some things that we need to consider. So I converted the ADP to my value number, positional ranked value number, positional specific value number. And then I asked the question, what do the populations look like? In other words, how is the public seeing quarterbacks, RBs, tight ends, and wide receivers, just kind of overall, all the ones that I could grab from the FFPC. Just kind of, what does it look like? Is there something going on I need to be aware of? Right? I mean, anybody talking about this on Twitter? No. Let me show you what is kind of intriguing. Let me pull the next figure out, if I can. There we go. Public's view of FFPC best ball positional base populations from 100 at the top to 0. And this is the old box and whisker. It's pretty much just a visual way to look at the landscape, right? That's, it doesn't have necessarily predictive value. It's just a beginning to interpret what you need to do, right? So this is part of my process. So what you're looking at in light blue is quarterback, the orange is running backs, the deep blue purple lines are tight ends, and the orange yellow with red is wide receivers. So hopefully you see right away some interesting things. First thing to see, and I'll go through it, and these numbers here to remind what a box and whisker is. Box is 66% of the population. So the 82 to 39. So that is where 66% of quarterbacks are sitting in this ADP FFPC best ball environment here. And we have the, I think this is the median here. No, this is the average here. No, I think it's the median. So the median is 64. Okay, it's a little high. In fact, that is the highest. So one might argue, you would think when you look and try to normalize value that you would get a median close to 50. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing 14 above the 50 percentile. So there's a skew that way. Okay. There's always a skew in quarterbacks and whatnot, and always will be, and given the nature of it. Of course, the best quarterback was 100. The worst quarterback is 0.08. So basically no value. So the whiskers represent the extremes, 99% of the population, here to there, 99%. So again, right away, this box is very condensed compared to the other populations. So there's a condensation of what the public is seeing for the quarterbacks. That how I interpret that is that even some of the so-called worst quarterbacks, there is kind of a thinking that there still could be some value. I understand injuries and things. So I think there's an idea that there might be some value on the bottom end of the median there. And that probably is the case. It's just in best ball, how do you draft to that, right? Usually setting up your teams with 20 players, usually 2 to 3 quarterbacks is what you grab. So I think this is what this is doing, because it is best ball, is some of these back end quarterbacks are having perceived potential value here. Doesn't mean in a one quarterback redraft where you can go to the waiver wire, this might not hold up. I haven't done the redraft here yet. When I do that, I will do this kind of information for the redraft. But for now, that's how I'm initially thinking about this data here for the quarterbacks. Next is the running backs. I think it is lots of variation. Look at the bottom end is 24, 82, basically 81.9 to 24. The median is 60. So there's a up skew of about 10 probably percent above. So there's maybe a little skew point above that. The whiskers, of course, go from top to bottom here. But the box says there's a lot of probably more variation. In other words, there are running backs that if you line them up are further apart than in the quarterbacks, a lot more condensed here. So quarterbacks, the idea would be one is right next to the other, then why should you pay, especially in best ball for some of the more highly ranked. I understand the and it's what I follow too. You get that elite quarterback is definitely a viable strategy. But I think after that, this condensation of the values kind of stacked on top almost invites you to wait a little bit. So you grab your one and then wait a little bit. And I believe that's what's creating this values. I think people are doing that and you're getting that kind of value. However, running backs, you're not seeing that kind of stacking next to each other. There's a broader distinction and difference there. A little skewed to the top, which you would predict. People have a very positive view of running backs and what they're doing and what they could be, versus the bottom. It's hard to imagine who's the handcuffs. I think in the 60 to 24, there's going to be handcuffs and maybe a few surprises. So people are not able to judge who really should be where there. So I think that's the opportunity in best ball is, cherry picking in that area. So if I was doing research, and I do, that's where I look. I really try to figure out, I think, what the public is thinking and where are they wrong. And I think you have an opportunity in the value 60% and down, trying to pick up some of that 4th or 5th, 6th RBs at that point. There's where that might swing you to the top of your league here. I think the 60 to 81, everybody's kind of aware, and of course the better ones are, above 82, right? That's your RB1-2 types up there. And the 60 is probably RB4, maybe 3, probably 4 4-5 right there. So you have some opportunities. So I think it's pointing to the opportunities there for us. Okay. The most surprising thing, and I was not predicting this, was look at the tight ends. Look at the median right at 50%, but there is an extreme skew from the median down to the bottom, 7.3, and the top. So 66% of the tight ends start at 68 down, and that is obviously quarterbacks are at 82, running backs 82 basically, wide receivers 80. We'll get to that in just a second. So I'm reading these numbers here. So we've got an extreme situation here. I think we've got a big time skew in the value of the so-called elite tight ends. So there's this idea that the public is probably overvaluing tight ends above the, say, 70 percentile, except for maybe the elite 2 or 3. So there's this draft idea in best ball. You grab an elite tight end and then you wait. And I think what they're picking up on is the fact that the public is not reading the second and third tight ends at all well. They have no clue. They are the most uncertain about this whole population here. So uncertainty means it's hard to figure out, but that's where the opportunities are. So right now I've drafted my fifth league. I'm trying to get a top tight end and then trying to cherry pick 2. A lot of them are actually at the bottom of that, probably below the 50th percentile or at it, right? And if I miss a tight end, elite one, I think I'm grabbing some kind of back-to-back tight ends in about the 9th or 10th round there. But that, I would not have predicted this population, and I think it's telling us, again, the public is very confused by the tight ends. And so the opposite would be the public doesn't think it's confused on the quarterbacks. And I understand there's a lot of year-to-year carryover between quarterbacks, so I think that's part of it. Is kind of what the data has shown year to year is quarterbacks are, doing well for us every year. So I think there's that safety, there's that understanding of quarterbacks and whatnot. Okay, wide receivers are a little bit lower. The box is 80 to 28, so it's a little higher up. So there's a little bit more condensation than RBs. The median's 54. It's a little skewed, but not a lot. I think the public, given this kind of predictive scenario here, 54, 55, I think they're right. It's almost the way it should be, actually. So in other words, I think the public is probably the most accurate overall on wide receivers. Probably not surprising. Again, there's a nice yearly carryover here, so it may be harder to find your bargains there on wide receivers. So that's probably not so surprising there. That's kind of my takeaway, is there's not a big takeaway, that the public is probably, pretty good at judging wide receivers, at least, what people are thinking about right now in May. I mean, it changes come August, but we're dealing with best ball leagues now, not in August. Okay, so that's my overall. I had some nuggets there I think I threw to you. And you should listen to that slide again, write your notes, and then go through and look at the FFPC Best Ball ADP and really start doing, circling your research here on who you need to fish around a little bit, given the context, given the foundation, given the background, the reference class forecast background of what the public is telling us right now. They're opening the door in the case of some positions, and other ones probably not as much. So that's kind of what we can't start our own situation. We play where we're allowed to play, and this is what the rules are right now as far as what the public has given us, right? Okay. So next thing that I do is a little different. And so what you see is the top 24 in value from the best is number 1 to the 24th value of position. And I charted that. I didn't put trend lines. I think the data's telling us some things. So I think we have an opportunity to look at some things and think about what the public is telling us. And let's start with quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are the blue circles here, okay? And you see that, of course, there's always a top everything. Second, third, fourth. So notice value-wise, the public on the fourth quarterback is value in the fourth quarterback less than the fourth wide receiver and running back. Okay, I don't know if you realize that, but there it is. And of course, here's the tight end, so you can see there's an interesting tale for quarterbacks and tight ends that are way different than running backs and wide receivers. They almost fall on top of each other. There's some other things. I'll blow these two lines up with my next figure and we'll be done. But anyway, so there is clearly something happening at the fourth quarterback this year. So it looks to me like, I know people talk about tiers. I think the public's telling us 1, 2, 3 is a tier. And then 4, 5, 6 is a tier. 7 might be a separate tier. 8. And then we start this linear decay down all the way to the 22nd. And it looks like there's a big break there. And even a break at 18. And even a break at 15. So those breaks tell me that if I am going to play late quarterback, I do not want to grab one past the 14th quarterback, at least in best ball, at least what the public has given me. And, you need to do some research probably in this area, the 8th quarterback to the 14th. I think if I am going to miss on an elite quarterback, then that's where I need to cherry pick and do my research on, right? And try to figure out when and where those pop up. What round will you start seeing that? And I had another lesson on where I tracked rounds of the positions and whatnot. So I think those gaps are telling me to be extra cautious and do extra research here. That's how I'm interpreting that. Tight ends, we got one elite tight end, Kelsey. Number 2 is what usually is Andrews. Number 3 is, who is it? Is it Kittle? Is it Pitts? Whoever it is right there. That's almost the second tier. And it looks like 4 and 5 are together. Maybe 6 is a separate tier. 7. And then, we're down to the 13th tight end. And we break into the 18th tight end and look at the 24th break. So there's some interesting gaps here. And it looks to me like the 7th tight end below, there's that gap. So I think if you miss Kelsey and you have to have a tight end, certainly you'll take in here, but you might research, is there any bargains in here? And if there isn't, then I think I would research to the 13th tight end, but I wouldn't go below that. So I might actually take, say, the 9th and 10th back to back, or whatever you think streaming works would be in there. So I would probably stream 2 tight ends and then grab a late tight end down for my third one. If you can grab Kelsey, I understand you might think Andrews. The public says it is 5% less of value. You could think of these as value numbers. And the third one is about 92. And we hit 10% less value at the fourth. So we have a decay of 10% in the fourth tight end. Quarterback, you've got a decay at the 8th quarterback. So double the length before you decay to 10% value less. So you have a little more leeway in quarterbacks here. And look at the decay value of running backs and wide receivers, 13. So almost the end, to me, it looks like it's about 11. So, but anyway, notice you can get out to the 15th and you still have at least 10%, 90% of the top. So people do some late wide receivers and running backs, and it's certainly good to have probably one of each in here, probably the safe way. But I'm warning you that your quarterbacks are starting to decay pretty quick, and your tight ends definitely have decayed by the fourth tight end. You have lost 10% in perceived value by the public. Okay, doesn't mean that's what you think. I'm just telling you what the public has given us. Okay, that's the whole point of this exercise, is what is the public giving us here. And so running backs and wide receivers, the 24th, so moving into the third level, you've hit about the, say, 80th percent. So we've lost 20% in value. So it's almost 10% in WR1 and RB1, another 10% loss by the end of RB2, WR2. So if you kind of think about that a little bit. And I strung this out to the 60th, and you can see the circle is the RB and the triangle is the running back. So it's interesting, they're kind of on top of each other, the first 6. So half of the RB1, WR1, they're on top of each other, right? The public's saying that they're about 5% difference in value in the first 6. Notice that the wide receiver on the next 6 roughly is a little higher in perceived value than the running back. So you have a little bit of an interesting, how do you want to play that? Looks like they're back together. Looks like they're back together here. I'm just kind of, and then looks like we have a couple of wide receivers a little higher. And notice at about the 27th, let's see, what is that? Is it the 27th? Notice there's complete takeoff. There is a decay right here at the 28th RB that never recovers versus the wide receiver. So if you're down that far and your opponents are picking the wide receivers, the public is saying the wide receivers are worth, what is that, 5-10%? No, probably about 5% more value versus yours. So if I am looking at this data, I'm trying to be really cautious and doing my research here to here. Okay, there's another little tier, and then here, tier, and another one. So all these tiers I'm breaking down and trying to figure out who is, who's the public wrong? Because the public says overall, all these folks are less than all the wide receivers. In other words, if you flip a coin, might as well go wide receiver. That's what the public's telling you to do. So, again, which wide receivers is the public wrong on? People spend a lot of time up here. I argue we should spend all our research time down in here, especially where you start seeing this division, because that's where, if the public's right and you're not, then you've lost X amount of value. So you need to really be what's going on. People say, oh, the middle rounds. Well, I think they may not understand what's happening, but here it is, folks. This is what's happening. This is what's going on. Is this neat or what? Okay, this is Dr. Bush. I'm about had enough fun. Here, I will tell you my next thing I need to do. I'll just show you the first team here. So, I'm going to go team by team, position, player, and then the public's value of that. And let's see overall. In other words, this figure allows us to juggle all the players at one time to kind of see the relative value. So an 80% wide receiver is worth an 80% RB, etc. So you need to think about this, and I've got all 32 teams broken out by how the public's perceiving it. So I will try to go through that in my next lesson. So please come back. Woo woo, we're having fun.